But before we talk about the situation in Mexico after the revolution, we have to know what was the Mexican Revolution. The Mexican Revolution was an armed conflict that began in Mexico on November 20 of 1910. The history of this conflict dates back to the situation in Mexico in the dictatorship known as the Porfiriato. Porfirio Diaz exercised power in the country in a dictatorial manner from 1876 to 1911. During these 35 years, Mexico experienced remarkable economic growth and had political stability. But these achievements were made with high economical and social costs. The country developed at a huge price. The native and peasants lost their lands because they were forced to sell them to make them productive. The situation generated dissatisfaction in the population that responded to repression and intimidation. So now we are going to talk about the causes of the revolution. The revolution began on November 20 of 1910, 34 years after General Porfirio Diaz succeeds after 2 attempts of becoming president and imposing to the country his new model of government known as the Porfiriato. But we have economic, political, and social causes of the Mexican Revolution. Among all these causes, we have the null freedom of expression, social inequality, laboral overexploitation, and many others that led to the tiredness of the parents of the Mexican people, which culminated in a series of armed rising over the overthrow of the Porfirista regime.
Social inequality and the concentration of wealth. People could not elect any person. They were imposed by Porfirio Diaz, who was against re-election, but he remained in power more than 30 years. A vacant which actually belonged to indigenous people, peasants and very poor people who didn't know how to do their money, and the government stripped them properties away. There was no freedom of expression. The press was prohibited to give any opinion of any kind against the government, and the people who have opinion against the government were going to jail. Workers and peasants lacked for labor protection, so were they exposed to exploitation in the work. They have to work 12 hours to gain 75 cents. Repression and use of the force. Working conditions were appalling. But when the workers tried to express their feelings, the government brutally shut them down. The Mexican Revolution was the spark that precipitated the promulgation of the 1917 Constitution, which included articles on the church-state, separation, national sovereignty, and the subsoil, property rights, community groups over the lands of the community, the right to the workers to organize and go on strike, and many other aspirations. The Constitution, it was a statement that delegates that who wanted for Mexicans could be carried out immediately.
Pre-revolutionary Mexico is a period in the history of Mexico that are in the period between 1917 through 1940, when the armed confrontation of the Mexican Revolution had ended. This was to intend to create or start a revolt that changes what had already happened during the Mexican Revolution. These are the main changes after the revolution. Overthrow of the dictatorship. The Mexican Revolution managed to overthrow the dictator Porfirio Diaz with the fall of the regime. Democracy was restored and the creation of new norms framed in a state of law was possible, with full respect for the three public powers. But, despite the advances at political level, it was impossible to prevent political chaos after the revolution, product of interest of various rebel groups. Second change was the promulgation of the Constitution on 1970 in the city of Querétaro. The Constitution was drafted that granted individual rights to all the Mexicans and direct vote was created. Slavery was prohibited. Secular education was established for officials and private schools, and the creation of a Congress with two chambers, one of senators and one of deputies, was also allowed. Also to this, freedom of work was consecrated and a system of labor protection for workers was implemented, guaranteeing the maximum of 8 hours per week, 1 day of rest, and vacations.
Oil nationalization. All oil exploration and exploitation companies had to report the government that prompted the return of the well to the subsale to the nation ceded to the owners during the Porfirio Diaz term. Tito and Congress established the difference between land ownership and the subsale, noting that the former could become private property, but the subsale and its wealth belonged to the nation's direct, inalienable, and imprescriptible domain, which could have concessionaries for their exploitation and their exploration. Railroads. The revolution left their rail networks in ruins, creating the right context to create the National Railways Companies of Mexico in 1937, merging the different capitals, mostly foreign, such as International Interoceanic, Pan American, and Veracruz Railways. The evaluation of currency. In 1916, a new currency was issued that was in circulation for only a few months. The closure of companies produced a reduction in exports, and it was impossible for the country to obtain an external loan. These were some causes of an accelerated devaluation of the currency. As we can see, the revolution brought several consequences that, depending on the people's opinion, were good or bad. For example, these were good because of the division of church from state, the creation of a new roads, or bad, with the devaluation of the actual coin and a big future economical crisis. In order to get more information about this topic, we interview an expert. This is what we asked to him.
Difícil establecer eventos que hayan marcado exactamente el principio, el inicio y final, pero yo me atrevo a decir que la posrevolución inicia con la llegada al poder de Álvaro Obregón, y que fue quien se encargó ya básicamente de pacificar al país. El término de la posrevolución podemos decir que fue con el presidente Cárdenas, con la expropiación petrolera, o bien que termina la posrevolución en el año 2000 con la llegada de Vicente Fox al poder. Los principales problemas que tenía el país era la pobreza y había que completar la pacificación. Entonces el presidente Obregón, con métodos, pues digamos, hasta cierta forma inaceptables, se encargó de pacificar al país, y entre ellos pues fue el asesinato de algunos revolucionarios. Yo creo que los principales hechos que podemos marcar fue la expropiación petrolera por el presidente Lázaro Cárdenas, fue la matanza de Tlatelolco en 1968, con la matanza de estudiantes. Un hecho para mí también muy importante fue en 1994, cuando se le brindó autonomía al Banco de México. Otro evento muy importante pues fue el término del reinado interrumpido del PRI en el año 2000, con la llegada al poder de Vicente Fox, que abrió el camino a la alternancia, ¿verdad? El PAN gobernó por 12 años, regresó el PRI, y actualmente con el presidente López Obrador de Morena.